Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jeff Koshin West. My pronouns are he, him, and I want to welcome you back to Integral Transformative Bodyworks Sunday School. Today's September 6th, and we are entering into September, and this is our first program of September. And September for us is going to be a focus on the two foundational practices of ITB. We wanted to give some attention to this because we got some questions about what, one or both of the foundational practices, and I want to get into a little bit more details with both of them and give them their proper attention. So we're going to jump into that. Prior to getting into that, remember you can learn a little bit more about ITB and myself at embodyingitb.org. You can also find us on Facebook by Integral Transformative Bodywork. We're also on Instagram, and so just check us out in those places, and you'll have access to more and more information. We do our Sunday school every Sunday at noon Eastern time. We also do a free meditation class, meditation introduction or meditation practice, the second and fourth Monday of every month at 6 p.m. Eastern time as well here on Zoom. And we introduce a tradition called the Mondo Zen. And this, it's a beautiful practice to incorporate with ITB. It's one of the practices we highly recommend if you are into what we're doing here, and if you want to practice in a way that we find to be extremely helpful. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and hop in. So the title of today's is an intro to those foundational practices, and why the heck would we do these foundational practices, and where do these things come from? So, first and foremost, the two foundational practices are shadow work and what we call witness consciousness meditation. Now, a couple months ago, I believe, we dedicated a whole month to talking about shadow work, and shadow having to do like the origin of it, the history of it, how it manifests, how to work with it, different things along those lines. So just look back in our catalog on YouTube and you will find those videos there, and please use those. Those are super duper important. So we're going to get into a little bit about shadow work, and then also we're going to talk about the second one, which is witness consciousness meditation. We have not jumped into witness consciousness meditation as much. Witness consciousness meditation is a mouthful, and it's our way of delineating a practice that is separate from what some people, the different forms of meditation. So what we have found is that there needs to be a participation with a specific type of meditation. Meditation has a whole lot of different varieties. There's all kinds of different forms. And for the intention that we're hoping to hold with ITB and the concept of full recovery and the concept of personal transformation, it's pretty important to focus on a specific type of meditation. All types of meditation are beneficial in some form or style, but we want to be mindful that we're advocating here at ITB, myself and our stewards, we're advocating a very specific type of meditation that we want to have performed in order to serve those purposes of full recovery and personal transformation as best as possible. So that's kind of why we put those in place. So before we jump into some of the technicalities and what makes up shadow work and what makes up witness consciousness meditation, I want to talk about a little bit why these things kind of surface. Why do the foundational practices exist? Well, ITB is made out of 5 pillars. Those 5 pillars are huge domains of human investigation, human discipline, human academics. And so they're ginormous. And what I found along the way in presenting integral transformative bodywork was that folks would get very excited about certain pillars, as you know, they have preferences and they have interests and they have a focus, and that would be wonderful. But it was also kind of problematic in a way that there wasn't, it was kind of like an academic exploration. It was a kind of a exploration of the pillars, and there wasn't any real guidance. I wasn't providing any real guidance about what is fundamental to ITB. All the pillars are wonderful and fabulous and all that jazz, but what I noticed was that you can get wrapped up in one of the pillars and not perform the other 2 foundational practices, and you're not going to be getting anything out of it other than just learning some cool stuff, right? And so what I did along the way was I decided that if you want to explore the pillars, that's awesome. I want that 100%. And if you want to get the benefits out of integral transformative bodywork, what we're suggesting are the benefits out of ITB, then there are some non-negotiables. And after long contemplation and a lot of work, what I came to was the two non-negotiables of ITB were shadow work and this style of witness consciousness meditation. These two are foundational because they decrease some of the major problems that show up in religious communities, spiritual communities, personal transformation communities. They're going to decrease. They're going to decrease the probability of trauma, the probability of cruelty, the probability of toxic behavior in any one of those domains. And so these two were really, really important, I've found, and we'll kind of build off of this as we go. These two are paramount and, like I said, non-negotiable in these communities because of what happens in these communities. In these communities of religious, traditional, or religious, spiritual, personal transformation, or transformational communities, we are seriously risking our identity. We're taking up the activity of investigating our integrity, investigating our authenticity. We're investigating our lack of those things. We're investigating how we lie, how we fabricate. And that means there needs to be a lot of trust. There needs to be a solid container. There needs to be a lot of integrity in the community. And in those communities, what I noticed in a lot of those communities was a lack of those things. There was a lack of integrity. There was a lack of authenticity. There was actually even a lack of understanding of healthy interaction. And so the group kind of came up with their own type, the religion or the spiritual tradition or the transformational community. They just kind of came up with their own way of identifying toxic and non-toxic behavior. And that oftentimes was not informed. That wasn't an intelligent investigation and choice. It was kind of just like something that covertly manifested, and nobody really knew how to talk about it specifically. And even if they did, there seemed to be a lot of wishy-washiness with it, and there was no clear boundaries with caring for each other and what was healthy and what was unhealthy. And so seeing a lot of that happening in those communities as I made my way through those different communities, and also being that kind of, taking up and participating in that kind of tradition and doing my own self-reflection with that stuff and recognizing my lack of authenticity, my lack of integrity, and how I was cruel to other human beings. Through that investigation came the foundational practices, and we'll kind of get into those right now, and hopefully you'll get an understanding. We'll probably circle back to this concept afterwards in order to really drive home why these things are so important and so, like I said, non-negotiable in ITB. So the first one we'll start with is something like I said before, we've talked about a fair bit here on these videos in Sunday school, which is shadow work. And shadow, the term shadow is kind of an old term here in the West and Western psychology. It's been around when it comes to, it's kind of came up when during the rise of psychotherapy here in Western thought, Western perspective. And shadow has to do with anything of our identity, anything of our history or our story or of our personal experience that we have disowned, that we have pushed out of our life, that we have deemed bad, wrong, dangerous, not worthy of our attention and love. So we push it out into wherever. We push it out of our bodies, or we push it down, or we push it away. We move it out of our central orientation because it disrupts our mode of being. And so a very common example of shadow could be something along the lines of feeling afraid. And so if fear is, if in my home, if in my upbringing and my community, fear is not something I'm supposed to feel, then what will happen is that I will start to push my fear away, push it down, disown it to in some way. And I will do that somehow. Maybe when I get afraid, I may pinch myself so I feel pain. Maybe when I feel afraid, I'll make a joke so I make laughter occur so I don't have to feel my fear. Maybe when that fear arises, I get physically aggressive so I can feel anger instead of feel fear. And I act out through that anger then, and I act in an angry way, or I take the disposition of quote unquote an angry person. Maybe I don't go for anger. Maybe when I feel fear, I kind of wilt a little bit and move into a sense of sadness, maybe a sense of depression, and maybe move more towards numbness and sadness rather than feeling actual fear. So we do usually with something that we don't like, we will supplement an activity instead of that actual item. So if I don't want to feel fear, I'll kind of push that out, and instead of feeling fear, I'll push my focus to something else: anger, sadness, comedy, something to not feel, something to make sure that I don't feel that fear. It could be other things in the physical world. It could be exercise. It could be eating. It could be shopping. It could be prayer. Literally, religion can turn into a way of not feeling actual sensation. So I can, instead of feeling fear about whatever, I will turn to feeling this positive sensation I feel from prayer to my higher power, whatever tradition that is. If I feel fear, instead of feeling fear, I'll go to have some food that makes me feel good or provides a new sensation to focus on instead of feeling the fear. So this is kind of how shadow is made. This is a general example of it. Shadow is made by disowning something that is not okay, not worthy, not good as far as your own perspective, or that your community, your culture, family has taught you is not good. And we will disown it. We'll push it away. Another common thing that comes up with shadow, one of the things we disown is, and for good reason, is trauma, any kind of trauma that's occurred for us. Trauma in any form. Now, it doesn't have to be, understand something when it comes to shadow and trauma. The trauma does not have to be a monumental trauma in your adult perspective, reflecting back on it. So you could be a child who did not get to, who one of their beloved toys had broken and then had to be thrown away. And that could actually be a big trauma for you. That could, and that mindset of that child's self that is inside of you could be a very, very powerful trauma for you in a sense of loss. And so since that sense of loss was very powerful, you might have push that into some different territory. Other traumas are kind of obvious ones that we hear about, some of the worst ones that we hear about in our culture. And so it's for good reason that we get rid of, that we try and disown trauma, that we try and hide trauma or suppress trauma, or avoid the feelings and sensations and the complexity of a traumatic experience because it's so darn overwhelming. It's so uncomfortable. And so shadow occurs by disowning something of us. Okay, if you're wondering, is there a general idea of what makes up a human being? Yes, there is a general map of what makes up a human being, and that's why we have in the 5 pillars of ITB, we point to the integral map. And the integral map is essentially the map of what it is to be human and to show up in this human body and have an experience of reality. And so if you're wondering what's the starting point of what we could possibly leave out, we look at the integral map and we say, okay, this is the one of the best representations of the human experience and the domains of reality experienced by humanity. So let me go through this map, learn this map, and recognize where I might have disowned certain material and done different things as far as that's concerned, performed different types of disowning and fragmentation and whatnot. So this is an option for you. It's also relatively easy to find shadow when it comes to what are you afraid of, or what are you upset with, what agitates the crap out of you, and what are you maybe allergic to, not meaning in a physical way, but you're maybe allergic to certain topics or you're allergic to certain people. you really hate certain human beings. You really feel agitated by being around certain human beings. You may feel really strong physical responses about being around other human beings. We call these kind of allergic reactions to them. Those can be also called triggers of that shadow. And so usually when we're around somebody that irritates the shit out of us, that usually means that they're exhibiting behavior. There's something about their presence or about their behavior that reminds us of material that we have disowned. So if I'm around someone that pisses me off or that agitates me or just irritates me for some reason, if you notice yourself saying, wow, these people just irritate me, but I'm not quite sure why, that's certainly a direction to go and investigate to find that shadow material, because the probabilities are very high that that person, like I said, is exhibiting behavior or exhibiting something that reminds your awareness of what you have disowned. And that's why you're upset with them, is because they're reminding you of what you've disowned. And so that's usually how that game goes. So this is the beginning of shadow. How we suggest you go about integrating it in ITB is, once you identify you have some shadow, you then should do something with it. And the doing part of it is what we call integration. So in ITB, we don't get rid of shadow. We don't try and kill shadow. We don't even try and maybe heal or answer the question of shadow. While that is a thing that you can do, we talk about something called integration that says, even if this is a part of your identity that you've disowned, just simply welcome it back in. The first step is welcoming it home, just letting it come back into your life, and learning how to feel it, learning how to experience it, learning how to include it in your wholeness, in your whole humanity. So if we take that example of fear, as a person starts to walk closer to some of that, material that may irritate them and whatnot, and start moving towards fear, they'll have to go through all the work they've done to avoid that fear. Okay, so that's oftentimes the work of shadow work, is you have to go towards the uncomfortable stuff that you've put in between you, like the behavior, the coping mechanisms, the maybe sick habits that lives between you, your awareness, and the fear on the other side. So you have to kind of go through that muck and that crap and that pain and that discomfort and agitation and that confusion in order to get to your fear and get to that experience of that fear. And that may be really explosive for you. The majority of the time, when we actually make contact with that which we have disowned, it's not bad necessarily. It's not uncomfortable. It's just a lot of stimuli. The material that seems to be the material between us and what we've disowned is usually more agitating than the actual thing that we've actually disowned. Because if we go back to the example of this fear, you first started getting rid of this fear. The major hook of this fear being disowned was because you lost a toy, or because this was a very important thing to a younger age, but not an important thing to you as an adult human being. We may bump into that and be like, holy shit, the reason I'm really, really afraid, or the reason of this fear, the component of this fear, is related to the loss of one of my favorite toys. As a child, that's big, and you can feel that, but you can be with that. That's not something that's going to wreck your adult human experience. There's something you can console that child, you can console that fear, and you can start to feel that fear a little bit more. And for an adult, you may be like, oh my God, this is the most ridiculous thing ever. I've been doing this shitty behavior because of this first experience of losing, this toy. And so as an adult looking at some of this stuff, sometimes it's just kind of comical of how much of these shitty castles you've built, these shitty behaviors and practices that you've built based off of something. As an adult, you're like, why the hell did I even get upset with this? So that's sometimes really comical. So the actual material that you're letting come home, that can be, there can be a whole lot of different responses we have with that stuff. So we don't want to think of it as a very problematic. We just want to think about it as just letting it come home, opening the door and letting some of that material start to come home, letting some of those experiences come home. the experience of that young person losing that toy may be very powerful for your heart. So it may be very intense, but it doesn't mean, intensity doesn't always mean bad. It may just be this intense love and loss and need for intimacy that that child had, that you as a child had with that toy. So this can be very fulfilling. What we oftentimes find about shadow work, and the reason we, wave this flag so intently in, or I should say, beat this drum so intently in ITB, is that when that material that you've disowned comes home, it's inspiring. It breathes juiciness back into your life. It's the return of personal power. So this is very exciting. This is very, very good for human beings. And so the work of it can be a pain in the ass, but when it actually comes home, like, it can really fill our hearts, it can really fill our souls, it can be a huge kind of reintegration and fulfillment that can come from it. So we kind of want to keep in mind that with shadow work, this is of great importance, and this is why we do it. And this is how we do it, by simply getting comfortable with receiving from our heart these materials and this experience, and training our nervous system and our heart to receive whatever material is between ourselves and that item that we've disowned. And whatever that material in between can be very tumultuous and agitating, but it's still worth kind of receiving and experiencing in our heart. So it comes from that history of disowning. That's how shadow is born. We do it because we do shadow work because it's empowering, because it brings back, it's going to create an opportunity for our wholeness to truly exist, and it's going to clean up a lot of the crappy behavior that's been built around that material that's been disowned. How we do it, there's a number of different ways. Traditional psychotherapy and counseling, perfectly fine. Psychoanalysis, perfectly fine. That can be extremely helpful. I mean, that's the whole point. Ultimately, that is the foundational point, is integration of those things. Different schools of thought do it in different ways as far as the psychotherapy and counseling is concerned. We at ITB really suggest a Rogerian type of a perspective of counseling, which means it's a very person-based. It's about the counselor and the client are there just to witness the client's unfolding and goodness and nature of existence. So it's a little bit of a different exchange than maybe, going to get diagnosed with a condition. This person-centered type of psychotherapy and counseling is meant to be two people celebrating and witnessing the life of the client in this perspective. It's not to get hung up on hung up on conditions or different things along those lines, or diagnoses and things like that. Of course, those conditions and diagnoses are recognized and understood. It's just not a focus on just that. It's focused on the humanity of the client and the fulfillment and the inclusion of the client's full humanity. So this is a very Rogerian tradition. Rogerian refers to Carl Rogers, the great mind Carl Rogers. And if you want to learn more about that stuff, that's a brilliant kind of focus to go through. But anyway, that's a little bit of comment on that. Other ways you can do that is, of course, get with us here at ITB. Myself and the stewards are perfectly capable of helping out with that. Other ways of doing this, you can also investigate this. One of the primary traditions we pull from is the tradition of voice dialogue practice, voice dialogue. I don't want to call it therapy, but voice dialogue investigation, voice dialogue practice. Education. Voice dialogue was created by two psychoanalysts, Hal and Sidra Stone. This was a husband and wife partnership, and they basically used the concepts from Jungian tradition of archetypes to basically start voicing these different components inside of us so that we could include them more fully and get to know the anatomy of our psyche a little bit more. This is brilliant work. I suggest it for anybody that's in a leadership position, anybody that's honestly, if you're a human being, you need to learn this shit 100%, okay? Hands down. Whether you're a parent, a child, a coworker, a boss, a manager, someone in power, or someone just trying to understand what the hell it means to be human, voice dialoguing is going to help you out. So let's just put that aside as a certain community. Let's just say, if you want to fulfill this life as a human experience, voice dialogue is going to help you out 100%. So these are some primary ways that we suggested, okay? Traditional counseling and psychotherapy and psychoanalysis, voice dialoguing, working with someone who is trained in that stuff and learning that work, and working with us here at ITB and doing with myself or with our stewards. So that's kind of how that goes. How often you should do it is, this is something that is very important to us in ITB, which is you should not do shadow work as a side thing, you know, as just this thing you pick up every once and again. In my view, and this not just my perspective, it's with a lot of the community and personal transformation. In my view, if you are actually serious about personal transformation and recovery of any kind, shadow work needs to be like as essential as your sleep habits, your hygiene habits, your food and feeding habits, your exercise habits. It is an essential part of being human, because that which we disown has a tendency to beat us amongst the head and neck if we don't give attention to it. And it will beat us amongst the head and neck while we're doing our life, which means that it increases the probability for us to act out cruelly, to act out in a dehumanizing way to ourselves as well as others. So it increases the chances for you to cause more trouble for yourself and other human beings. And it is a primary core practice to decreasing that probability. If you believe that you want people to be free, you want people to be recovering, if you want people to be enlightened, if you want people to be closer to their higher power, for people to thrive, for people to succeed, for people to just be, shadow work must be, in our opinion, must be an essential practice that you include on a regular basis for yourself. And so we suggest this is a non-negotiable for that very reason, because it's something that will clean up your history and clean up your life and clean up where you're going in your future and help you see things more clearly. This is an exercise that is going to support your ability to see clearly what's unfolding in front of you and what life is actually sharing with you, what another human being is actually sharing with you. So this is of great importance, and it is a non-negotiable as far as we're concerned. If I put this into context a little bit, I am at, let's say, hell, I'll just pull from my own life. In the situation of being a human being making relationships, what commonly occurs is, if I'm relating to a romantic partner, all right, this is really great material for the relationships that are really important to us. Romantic partners, family members, people that we do big work with. These are people that we suggest we care about. These are people that hang around us and are in our, we make an effort to spend time around. So with that declaration that you care for someone, it would be of great importance to pay attention to how your shadow behavior, the behavior around your shadow material, and how that shadow emerges. It would be an act of love and an act of care for you to become aware of that, because what we notice that occurs is that the relationships that we believe to be central for us, those who we care about, we have this tendency to, and this is, for ill or good, we have this tendency to work out our shadow material with those individuals. All right. So it's let's stick with the romantic partner perspective. So if I did not get the opportunity to be nurtured by my mother or father, by a parent in a way that I wanted to, if I didn't get to, and let's say this is, if I didn't get this experience of feeling closeness with my father, then within my relationships, I will most likely look for romantic partners that behave like my father, that behave in the way that my father occurred. And in this case, my father was distant. My father was oftentimes unavailable, both physically and emotionally and psychologically. And so in my own history, that distance that I experienced with my father, there's a very high probability that with a lot of my partners, that I would act out that kind of relationship where I would actually seek out something that was familiar. That relationship to my father was familiar. It was it was very common to my heart and common to the way that I made relationships with people that I cared about. And I will act that out because that's part of my foundational experience as a human being. I'll inevitably act that out with romantic partners or people that I care about. And so what that manifests as is I may pick partners, and it doesn't matter what your gender or orientation is. This is an issue with my father, but this also, I identify as a heterosexual male. So these were all women that I acted these relationships out with, this relationship out with. It doesn't matter that it came from my father. It matters that it's a material that was a hang up for me and it wasn't reconciled. And so since my romantic partners for my orientation were females, people identifying as females, then that was kind of who I acted it out with, because those are the people that I cared the most for, or that I prioritized as caring the most for and wanted the most amount of nurturing love and physical nurturing love from. So since I prioritized them that way, this material was going to act out in this relationship. So it's interesting to consider why a lot of my beginning relationships were with females, were with women that were kind of unavailable, kind of cold and distant to a certain extent. I shouldn't say cold, but distant to a certain extent, that were not very touchy-feely. So I was the one bringing all the big touchy-feely energy. And I was attracted to women that represented kind of a behavior or an orientation that my father experienced, or that my father was kind of embodying and experiencing in his life. So this is a really common example of, and this is true to my story as a human being. This is a very common example of how not rectifying shadow is going to manifest in our relationships, is going to show up in our relationships. We're actually going to actively seek out human beings to help us deal with this material, to make contact with this material. So there is this perception of, I make this romantic relationship with this woman, and that starts to bring up my issues with my father, the distance and my need for nurturing from my father. And that's happening in our relationship. So if I'm aware of that, that's great. I can say, all right, oh shit, I'm kind of bringing my dad's stuff into this relationship, and that's going to be problematic. But for the majority of the population, they're unaware of this information. They're unaware of the nature of the psyche and how we do these things with shadow. So there may be a lot of stuff percolating, a lot of emotions that I'm feeling in this relationship that I think is coming from this person, that's coming from this woman or from this relationship. And I'm going to say something's wrong with this relationship, not something's wrong with me and something's wrong with my unrectified issues. I'm not going to look to myself and say, oh man, I need to work that out for myself. I need to unpack that out for myself. The usual tendency is that material, that shadow material, percolates in between the two of us, and we then act it out. I force that person, in this case, that woman, to work through that material for me. Okay, so I'm using them to work through that material and get to the core of it. It actually oftentimes doesn't even matter what the fuck their behavior is. Oftentimes it's just my projection onto them, because I have identified them as the source of love and care and nurturing for me in my relationship. So this is shadow arising, messing with the relationship. And some people think that this type of dynamic occurring is like, they believe this is just how relationships are. And I am foursquare against that. Okay, I do not believe that's what the dynamic of a relationship ought to be. To me, and to many, that type of dynamic is actually a cruel act to the partner, to the person I'm engaging in. That is a cruel thing to do to them, because I'm asking them to carry my stuff and carry my shadow and work that, let me use them to work my shadow work out on, instead of working my own shadow work internally and then coming to them with nurturing love and appreciation and connection. So that distinction is a huge difference in dynamic. So what we suggest is recognize with shadow work in this example, if I have my romantic partner here, shadow work or the shadow material surfaces, and I say, oh, holy shit, because of what she said or what she did or how she's acting, that's triggering my material with my father. So I need to remember that, wow, I need to take that and I need to work on that myself. I need to go to my psychotherapist, my coach, my support team, and I need to work that on my own and integrate that, and not expect my partner, my romantic partner, my sweetie, not expect them to have to unpack that for me or blame them or exact retribution on them for the material that my father was responsible for. My father deserves accountability to that, not my partner. And so this huge distinction, this huge shift in dynamic is what we suggest is going to be the healthier version of an actual relationship. And so this is one of the major reasons we do shadow work, is because it'll start to clean up the crap that happens between partnerships in relationships, which is inevitable. Now this happens both ways. Of course, my romantic partner can do that shit to me as well. And if she's uninformed about shadow material, it's going to be a shit show. So either direction, it's going to be problematic. So if we take this now to my relationship to my higher power, or my relationship to government, the police, what's it called? Different types of educational institutions, systems in general, that I have shadow material with all those things. And it's not, so, and it's my responsibility to work that out, to identify that through that relationship, identify that shadow material surfacing, and for me to work that out. Those institutions, government, police systems, educational systems, religious institutions, they are not responsible for rectifying my damage that I have that comes from past experiences, even though I'm projecting them onto them. It's my responsibility to work that stuff. It's my responsibility to even that out. Now, that doesn't absolve them from being shitty if they are being shitty. Okay, just like it doesn't absolve my romantic partner from being shitty if she is being shitty. What it does is it cleans up the relationship, and it helps me see that, oh, this is my shadow material, but oh, wow, you're still doing shitty behaviors. You're still acting in a cruel and dangerous way, and I need to hold you accountable for that. Same thing goes for our systems that exist around us. So shadow work really seriously decreases the amount of confusion that's going to happen in a relationship. It's going to bring back our ability to self-soothe, to self-heal, to integrate. It's going to put it in our court to actually start integrating. And it's going to decrease the riskiness of blaming other people or other things or institutions for our lack of healing, our lack of integration. And so this is not the the downside to this is that this puts a lot of the responsibility in your court as an individual. It's not 100% your responsibility. The reality is that other humans do, unfortunate things to us and around us, and institutions do really cruel things to us and around us. So there definitely is an impact that we get from other human beings and from institutions. That's irrefutable. That's not something we're going to deny. And we're always going to be impacted by it to some degree. Now, depending on how aware of our own shadow material, that will kind of change how much that we perceive we are being inundated by another. And so shadow work does a lot for liberation, a lot for freedom, a lot for clarity, a lot for understanding. And this is of great importance when it comes to a person who's approaching a higher power or spiritual orientation, because man, higher power and spirituality, we have a tendency to really strongly project onto those domains or the people that are associated with them. Priests, spiritual teachers, gurus, practitioners, body workers, healers, whatever we want to call them, or whatever carriers of these mystical things or these spiritual religious experiences are, whoever the ambassadors are to those things, we have a tendency to strongly project onto them. And it's going to make your journey and your relationship to your higher power and your relationship to possible teachers of these things or guides along the way of these things, it's going to seriously decrease the probability of damage shared and problems between the two of you, if you're aware of your own shadow material and your own shadow work. And it's going to decrease the probability that you're projecting onto them some superpower or some that they are the keepers of your personal transformation, or they are directly related to your personal transformation or your connection to higher power. Even your projection, even your relationship to whatever you think your higher power is, you will project onto it. And part of this conversation of stages of faith or stages of spiritual unfolding or spiritual intelligence, one of the signifiers we notice along the way when it comes to kind of examining how spiritually sophisticated someone is or how deeply connected to their higher power they are, one of these is how much they project on them and how actually close and in intimacy they are with whatever that higher power is, and having to do with their projections coming in the form of beliefs, superstitions, anthropomorphization, believing that that their higher power is going to be human, is going to act in a human way, and going to have human attributes because, I'm a human. So if I'm a human, why wouldn't there be a human version of God or a human version of creation? So this is a projection. This is a belief that's what we find is to be untrue. Why on earth would the creative force of the universe actually be a human? What a kind of a silly kind of a concept that actually is when you examine it. So these are projections we have, and looking at these projections, looking at how we relate to higher power, or the people that are ambassadors of higher power in your perspective, these are how we project, and these are how we can kind of clean up some of those projections, clean up some of those confusions, clean up some of that stuff. So shadow work does wonders for us in ITB because it cleans up your perception of reality and your assessment of what's going on. And if you're with a group of people who are wanting to heal, wanting to evolve, wanting to become their greatest manifestation of self, or wanting to commit to the deepest possible intimate relationship with everything that is arising, having the language and practices and insights of shadow work are essential. And if you don't have those in place in a community, you increase the probability of projections, which increases the probability of cruelty and trauma and manipulation and all the things that are always the worst parts of spending time with human beings. So what we find is that everybody has shadow, everybody needs to do shadow work, and everybody is constantly projecting on a regular basis, but it's a matter of how badly they're projecting or how poorly they're translating reality. And the translation of reality is of the utmost importance when it comes to recovery, when it comes to personal transformation and personal growth. And the better you are at translating reality and translating what another human being is sharing with you, the better you're going to be at achieving your ultimate goal of staying awake and staying intimately connected with all that is arising. In ITB, that's one of our primary goals, is to be awake and connected to, in a healthy way, to all that is arising in reality, to not push anything back into the shadow, to not deny anything, but also to have healthy boundary and healthy relationship to all that is arising. So this is a tall order, no doubt about it. But like I said, we find that shadow work does a large portion of the duty of that, does a large portion of achieving that goal. And that's why we keep shadow work as a primary practice for us. It's of the greatest importance as far as we're concerned. That's why it lives under that title of 2 foundational practices. So that covers some of the shadow work material. That covers why shadow is involved. If you want to learn some more about this or hear me talk a little bit more about this or get some more specifics about doing shadow work, like I said, look at the other videos on our YouTube channel that have to do with that month of talking about shadow, and there should be pretty clearly labeled. The second foundational practice is what we call witness consciousness meditation, WCM. We use that phrase because witness consciousness meditation comes in a lot of different forms around the world. Every ancient tradition, every religious tradition and spiritual tradition in different sects, the primary components of these religious and spiritual traditions, and the folks who are considered the great sages of these things, they all did something having to do with witness consciousness meditation. So we kind of took it away from any specific tradition, a name of a specific tradition of witness consciousness. And we just called it witness consciousness meditation. Witness consciousness meditation is a very specific style of meditation. There are a lot of styles of meditation out in the world. A lot of styles of meditation that most people come in contact first is a visualization exercise or an emotional sensation exercise. It's an exercise of imagining you're in a certain place or visualizing yourself aligning chakras or having an energetic system in a certain way or relating to a higher power, relating to a deity, relating to some manifestation of wholeness or oneness or purity or something along those lines. Other very common sensation-based meditation is a meditation that asks you to focus or bring your awareness to a specific emotion of maybe love or caring or happiness or pleasure, something along those lines. And this is a very sensory, sensation, physical body based type of a thing, and you're kind of creating this experience. And that's a defining factor of something that is not a type of meditation that is not witness consciousness meditation. One of the defining factors of witness consciousness meditation is that you're not trying to do anything. You're just attempting, to the best of your ability, to focus on receiving whatever is arising in your awareness, and that means internally or externally. All right, so witness consciousness meditation is not about an act of creating some outcome, something, some emotion, some visualization, or some arrangement of energy in our body or in the environment. It's about witnessing and receiving, listening, being open to just whatever is arising in our physical body or in the world. Okay. And so it is a focus on just that. And you don't really, I mean, if you're going to be doing something, that's what you're doing. What you're doing is being receptive, being listening, you're being openness, you're being witnessing, and you're just kind of watching this occur. You're just aware of whatever is occurring. And for a lot of folks, witness consciousness meditation is boring as hell because they think, well, I should be doing something. We have, especially us Westerners, we have this mind of like, I should be doing something or I should be feeling something. If I'm doing this whole meditation thing correctly, I should feel like peaceful or enlightened or some other shit, right? There should be some kind of feeling or sign that I'm doing it, right? I should start having light coming out of my body or something like that. And the reality with witness consciousness meditation is that it's just asking you to be wickedly raw awake to what is occurring in the now. And that's where the gold is, quite honestly, because the more you train this way, the less probability of you projecting onto reality in a poor way. The human experience is that we are always projecting onto reality to some degree. And now it's like how badly we're doing or how accurately we're doing is the big question mark. So we're constantly projecting because we have like our only direct connection to reality is the olfactory nerve. It's like we have this brain and this spinal cord that is this major sensory component of the human experience. But it's like, it's never exposed to the outside air except through the olfactory nerve. So it uses eyes to figure out what's going on in the visual spectrum. It uses ears in order to pick up what's going on in the vibration or auditory spectrum. It uses nose and mouth to pick up what's going on in that other sensory taste smell territory, translating the molecules as they land in these sensory organs. And so it's all about this guess about reality. Okay. And we call that the human experience. And that's just the nature of it. And that's great and fine and fabulous and whatever. It has limitations and has certain wonderful wonders to it. So with witness consciousness and meditation, what we're attempting to do is we're attempting to be as present as possible, really awake to whatever's happening right in this moment. A lot of our culture, a lot of other practices are based off of how are you perceiving the past? How are you perceiving the future? How good are you at anticipating what's going to come next? How good are you at anticipating how life is going to unfold? This is a lot of, especially in traditional culture, American culture, this is a very, very, very common orientation. You're supposed to be able to think and deduce and rationalize how to make a good life so you get your basic needs taken care of and anticipate problems or anticipate situations to make goals or to survive problems. That's what we're supposed to be doing on a regular basis in this American culture. It's not about being present. It's about preparing for cleaning up the shit of the past and figuring out what's going to happen in the future. So it has very little to do with, and most cultures have very little to do with just being in the experience of what's going on right now. As far as meditation is concerned, that's our primary interest. As far as the major traditions and the sages put forth, that is the practice. That is what they want. That is where, quote unquote, that is where God is. That is where creation is. That's where spirit is. It's in the present moment experience of what is arising. And so witness consciousness meditation is the best way to do this. So it helps as far as enlightenment is concerned. It helps as far as being wakeful and really clear about what's occurring in front of you, and actually, since it decreases the amount of shitty projection or poor translation of reality, what happens is that when you're present, the more you've exercised that muscle of being present to the present moment, when there's a human in front of you, you're like richly there. There's a deep intimacy being shared because you're nothing but you're to the best of your ability, you're wickedly present. And that creates intimacy and connection with this other person. Now that also extends to every other goddamn thing in your environment that you put your awareness on. But when it comes to another human relationship, it really brings attention into the present moment. And that means connection in the present moment. And that can be very vivifying for the relationship, for the exchange. It doesn't mean it's going to go well. It just means that it can be very rich. It's going to enrich the exchange intensely. And if you're in that condition, if you live from that condition on a regular basis and you're relating with another human being who's completely unaware of that and has no clue about this stuff, it's still going to be a richer relationship, because if they're confused and if they seem to be showing signs of poor translation or confusion, you'll be able to most likely work with that a little bit better. You'll recognize, holy shit, they're confused right now. There's some confusion between us, and let's hunker down and unpack this confusion. Let's find understanding. Let's try and make our way to connection and equanimity and fairness and justness and compassion. And so that's some of the payoff there. The other thing that happens that we noticed that is, for me, which was the real reason why witness consciousness meditation was included, was that the other thing that occurs is that, and this comes a lot from integral theory and what Wilber talks about when it comes to witness consciousness meditation. The more we do work of witness consciousness meditation, the more we're going to notice what we are made up of. The more we're going to notice that my emotions, my sensations, and my thoughts, or my mind, we could say, the more I notice those things, the more I come to realize I'm not those things. I'm not my emotions. I'm not my physical sensations. I'm not my mind or my thoughts. There is something watching all those things occur. And if we just do a little exercise right now of this, I mean, just kind of sit for a second, and we'll start with the gross body. We'll just think of sensations. You're sitting in your wherever you are right now, or I'm sitting in my chair, so I'm going to use that example. I'm sitting in this chair and I'm feeling my physical sensations. I feel the gravity, the weight of my body at my ass and at my legs. I'm feeling the weight of my body pushing against the chair. I feel that weight. I feel the temperature in the room. My gross body tells me about the temperature, about stimuli in my environment, about humidity. My gross body tells me basic information, and I can watch my body do that and send me that information. The next thing is I can listen to my emotions. I can witness my emotions and watch them arise. There's different emotions that kind of ebb and flow, and the nature of emotions is that they arise. They give us data about internal and external situations, and then they kind of move on because there's more shit to learn, right? The environment is constantly changing. So emotions are going to be constantly changing. I'm constantly changing. So my emotional experience is going to constantly be changing in relationship to myself. So I sense those emotions hang out for a second. They give me information and data. I'm appreciative of that, just like I'm appreciative of my gross body telling me those things. And then those emotions kind of move on because reality continues to unfold. Next up is as far as thoughts is concerned. So in this specific moment right now, my thoughts, the thought body in me, or the thought experience of me, or the mind that is here, is interested in, focusing on material. It's taking in other data in my office. I mean, I'm in my office. There's tons of other shit here you people don't see. So my awareness about that. My mind also has the tendency to negotiate past and future, right? So my mind is also, I can watch my mind. I witness my mind measuring what I've said in the past for this lecture, as well as lectures in my recent history, as well as my lectures having to do with for YouTube and this channel and whatnot. And so it's measuring a lot of past data. And my mind is also doing what a mind usually does, which is looking into the future of like, what am I going to say next? Where does this portion of the lecture lead to? And then goes even farther beyond as far as future is concerned into after this lecture and what I'm doing for the rest of my day. And so the mind that is here kind of does these two things, right? It does what it's supposed to do. It tells me about my surrounding environment. It tells me about the past, and it tells me about the history. Now I'm watching that occur. So if you just watch your mind right now, if we all take a moment and just kind of watch your mind, you're hearing me talk and your mind is taking in that information. Your gross body is taking in that information. Now, what if you just kind of watch the next, you're looking at thoughts that arise. Maybe a thought arises, and it may be a verbal thought. So you may hear your thought being spoken in your own voice or someone else's voice. You may see it verbally. You may see the words come up. You may see images of what you're going to be doing later. Those are activities of the mind. And as you watch those, you're watching your mind. And so if you're watching your mind, what is the nature of that which is watching? Yeah. And so this is what we mean by witness consciousness meditation, to watch the play of the mind, the emotions, and the physical body. It is to witness this arising thing. And witness consciousness meditation is meant to remind you of this fact that everything you're watching is not you. So anything in your mind that you can watch, that you can witness, that's not who you are essentially. That's all things that come along with this human experience. Your true nature, and this is where in ITB we're really excited, your true nature is that thing that is watching it, and the word we use for that is awareness. Okay. Also, we use tech from a tradition called Mondo Zen, and in Mondo Zen they have a really great phrase for this type of mind. It's called vast potentiality mind. This dhyana mind, this wide open, receptive, clear, heart-focused mind is just watching this thing. And so they do use the term wit or mind, but it's pretty inexchangeable. When you talk to them about it, they oftentimes talk about it being exchangeable with awareness. So this awareness is watching all this occur. The awareness in you is just watching this human experience unfold. And that awareness is of great value. And that awareness is where you actually exist. And so the play of the mind, the play of the emotions, the play of the gross body just is a part of this experience. So in witness consciousness meditation, what we teach is focus on this. Remember, do this practice enough to where You don't have to quote unquote work to witness. You just naturally witness. It is normal. It becomes the default condition of your human experience to just witness, to just be receptive, and to just be this receptive awareness, receiving reality and then responding to it based off of what the hell's in front of you. So this is why witness consciousness for us in ITB is so important, because if you come to this, the more you practice this witness consciousness meditation, the more you quote unquote identify as awareness. If your awareness, anything that arises is just lovely. It's just like, oh, excellent, bring it here. I'm ready for this. Please, 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 please. And in the face of the conversation of trauma, this is of great value. Witness consciousness meditation in the face of trauma is extremely valuable because it gives you a place to kind of relate to your trauma. So if you're doing witness consciousness meditation a fair bit, this is the usual phases of things happening. So you're doing your meditation, your WCM meditation on a regular basis. And we use a Zazen tradition from my history in Rinzai Zen and Mando Zen. So you're doing your Zazen practice, right? You're sitting and you're just listening, right? So you're doing your Zazen, you're doing your Zazen, you're doing your Zazen. And as you're doing your Zazen, you're having this witnessing experience, and emotions arise having to do with who knows. This sensation arises. Maybe it really shakes you up. Maybe it really works you. Maybe it's like really causing a lot of turmoil and agitation. Now, the more you sit and witness and just watch that thing arise in you, staying close to it, but not being possessed by it, just kind of watching it and closely watching it, feeling it, sensing it, allowing it its space inside of you, allowing it space in your heart, in your body, the more you're able to just witness that arising and occurring, this increases the probability for trauma to be integrated. And so that phase occurs, right? That occurs while you're sitting on, or you're doing your meditation stuff. And then what you can do is you can take that material and then you can you come out of your Zazen practice, but you also start to talk about it. You do your voice dialoguing with it. You do your shadow stuff with it. You take it to your counselor or coach or whatever. And you start talking about that material, pulling it apart, using a therapeutic method to pull that apart, all the while still witnessing yourself pulling that apart, becoming it and then coming back out and then witnessing it again, playing that game of experiencing it and therapeutically working it. And that's the next phase. You get to actually witness it and talk about it and articulate it. And the more you articulate it and understand it and connect how it lives in your world, the next thing you'll see is how it creates behaviors in your world, how that shitty stuff, how that shitty behavior around shadow material lives in your relationships. But you can still do that because you're witnessing it, because you're wanting to proceed in the world from a witness place. So as you enact, as you go out and know about this shadow material and then do your relationships, you'll start to see little signifiers pop up of, holy shit, this is how this new shadow material lives in this relationship, lives in that relationship, doesn't live in those relationships. You'll start to become aware of how the shadow material lives in certain areas of your life, but doesn't in others. And you'll get to clean that up. You'll get to make a cleaner relationship where that shadow material lives. And this is very much given force or given power via that witness consciousness meditation activity. What I have noticed and what others have noticed is that the more we practice witness consciousness meditation and shadow work, the more we start to see the human's neurological ability to watch and to witness. That creates an opportunity to kind of liberate and get free from the bindings of the behavior that goes along with shadow material, with that disowned material. And so this was for me, this was a huge game changer personally, and also in presenting this with other people. This seems to be a hugely defining shift for folks, because most of the time what people get is they get a lot of, cheering for doing therapy, a lot of cheering for doing some kind of psychotherapeutic or personal transformation or shadow work stuff. But if you don't do some witness consciousness meditation stuff and some serious witness consciousness meditation practice, if you don't do that, it still is really hard to get some distance between you and behavior. It's still hard to get some distance to witness this shit that's arising in you. It's hard to get some distance and to create healthy, when I say get some distance, I mean get some healthy boundaries with emotions that are arising, sensations that are arising, shitty thoughts or behaviors or habitual mental patterns that are arising. It's hard to create healthy boundaries with them, so you can kind of lay like, oh shit, this is something that's here, and if I push it away enough, oh, I can turn it over, I can look at it, I can unpack it, I can sift through it, I can open it up, I can show it to other people and get their perspectives on things. And what we notice is that shadow work without witness consciousness meditation is dangerous, because you're just basically processing all the time, and there almost gets to a point, there's a real conflict of identity, because there's a big question. When you do shadow work, you start to notice there's a lot in you. There's a lot of different perspectives. There's a lot of different modes of being. There's a lot of different habituations that live there. There's a lot of different behaviors that have either been given space or not given space. So there's a lot of dynamism in us. And if we don't know about witness consciousness meditation, what we notice is like the person it gets exhausted, because they're like, holy shit, I'm kind of just running. My life is this spectrum of expressing these, almost being possessed or overwhelmed by these different phases or components of my spectrum of diversity and dynamism. And witness consciousness meditation, when we drop that reality into witness conscious, or into the mix, what we start to notice is like, oh, my true identity is not one of these components of my identity. It's not as in my body, this, in my human experience of this thing I call Jeff Koshin West, I'm not just a male. I'm not just a heterosexual. I'm not just a person with this education. I'm not just white. I'm not just coming from a Catholic background talking about Buddhist stuff and, Lakota tradition. I'm not just these, I'm not just a romantic partner. I'm not just a friend to so-and-so. I'm not just a ex to so-and-so. I'm not just a person trying to figure out his journey, a person trying to manage his insights and education and traumas. Those things aren't places I look from. They're things that I look at, and the place that I look from is awareness. My true nature is actually awareness, looking at all these different items. Okay, and so this shift of dropping in witness consciousness meditation and using witness consciousness meditation on a regular basis to support our awakening to our true nature, that creates a huge shift in relationship to this trauma and this shadow material that kind of opens up in front of us. I'm no longer, the more I can recognize that I am awareness, the less of an allergic reaction I have to shadow material. Okay, the less triggering I have, the less re-traumatizing I may go through. It decreases the probability of intense confusion when something new arises. It decreases the amount of time it takes for me to be confused in relationship to new stuff arising. It decreases the probability of me, when I'm in relationship to an other, something else or someone else, it decreases the probability of me getting confused by a projection and projecting onto them. And it increases the probability of me recognizing a trigger and then owning a trigger and working with that trigger, so that other person doesn't have to take the shit of that trigger. So the more we kind of focus on that witness consciousness meditation, the better off we are. The higher the probability we actually get to show up to reality, show up to our relationships, and be receptive to them. When we say witness consciousness meditation, the idea is not for you to be numb. What a misnomer that comes up with witness consciousness meditation is that if I'm doing witness consciousness meditation enough, I'm just kind of like lacking personality. I'm just like a blank slate to everything. I have no response to anything. And that's not true whatsoever. It's not, this pure awareness, this vast potentiality is not numb to reality. It's deeply connected to reality. This witness consciousness meditation is not, clinically distant from reality. It's right next to reality with a healthy boundary. So it's still in deep intimacy with what's going on. It's still in deep connection to what's arising, but it's not fused to it. Okay, it's not possessed by it. It's in deep relationship to it, and that relationship is vivid and juicy and exciting, and the nature, whatever it is that is arising, it's perfectly welcome in this experience at this point in time. So these two foundational practices we have found, I have suggested, are non-negotiable. And they are non-negotiable both for decreasing trauma, for decreasing suffering on the planet, but then also for increasing our ability to show up to life, increasing our ability to show up in our relationships, increasing our ability to be connected to ourselves as well as other people, as well as any other thing or person we want to put our attention on. So this is a pretty potent type of an experience that happens for people. The more they do their shadow work and the more they do their personal or their witness consciousness meditation, the more they start to notice, wow, life is okay. Life, I mean, it's not okay in the context of everything's glorious or everything's rosy and everything's great. It's okay in the sense of it is what it is. It's arising, and it's because it's arising, I'm embracing it. Because it's occurring, I'm embracing it. Because it's here right now, I'm holding it and relating to it. Not that it's good. So you can look at the tragedy of what's going on in the streets as far as police brutality, as far as racism, as far as xenophobia is concerned, about as far as hunger in the world and war and other horrible acts of violence and cruelty that occur in the world. You don't look at those and you're not like, yay, well done, everybody. That's not the kind of embracing we're talking about. We're talking about when you're faced with those tragedies, with those really unfortunate situations, there's a recognition of, okay, this is what's arising. All right. It doesn't really matter whether I like it or not. This is what's up, and this is what needs to be engaged with. And when we engage it, we have a moral orientation to decrease the suffering of the planet. So when we engage the situation, we want to make sure that I'm engaging it, and I'm engaging it with the intention of unraveling the madness, creating understanding, creating nurturing and compassion, and enacting in a conscious and justice and fair focused type of way, sticking up for honesty and truth and clarity and fairness as best as I can at every time, in every moment. And so this is what we mean by an okayness. I'm okay with it. I will receive it, and I will connect with it. So from this type of these foundational practices lay a really solid ground for us to stand on in order to receive the nature of reality. Okay. And in the nervous system, it creates a very, 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 very stable component of the nervous system to simply receive reality, to simply be connected to reality, and thus respond correctly to reality, instead of just be like, holy shit, racism, you people are bad, don't ever do that, that's really dumb stuff. Or, oh my god, another war, oh wow, well, that's war, that's just how humans are, I'm gonna play my video games. Oh, this is happening with my neighbor down the street, it's domestic violence, oh shucks, that's really unfortunate, well, I'm gonna go tend to my garden. So instead of these things occurring and us kind of disconnecting from them and maybe not engaging them and not kind of relating to them, instead of these things arising, us turning towards some kind of justification or some type of blame or resentment, we turn towards them, receive the impact of them, and then engage them as best as possible within the confines of our resources and our community. How that occurs, of course, is a fucking mystery, because every one of you are uniquely different and every situation is uniquely different, but we attempt to do these things as best as we can. We also need to recognize that every battle is not our own, and so that's a difficult thing to navigate also. But that may be that's probably going to be a different video. Anywho, so in witness consciousness meditation and shadow work, we perform these things because we are hoping to increase the probability for us to kind of get a better sense for that, get a better practice for that, and get a better understanding for that. And so this is kind of our presentation on the two foundational practices. This is our introduction. In the next 2 weeks, we will get a little bit more into shadow work and what's it called, and witness consciousness meditation in relationship to the question of how do these things help with recovery? How do these things, recovery meaning trauma and working with trauma and different things like that. We've touched on that a little bit here today. We'll also talk about how shadow work and witness consciousness individually kind of talk to or how they relate to, how they support recovery, how they support personal transformation, because they both work in relationship to those outcomes in different ways. They're both beneficial in different ways. It's the same type of work, they just benefit in different ways. And so we'll kind of articulate that a little bit more. So before I go, I want to create some opportunity for any questions that might come up. So I'm just going to pause for a second and see if there's any questions. All right, so that's our presentation on the introduction to the 2 foundational practices. Like I said, next week we will focus on, I believe it's the how shadow work contributes, specifically shadow work contributes to full recovery, and how shadow work contributes to personal transformation. My name is Jeff Koshin West. Thank you for paying attention. Thank you for participating. I hope you come and join us for some more. Please go to embodyingitb.org for more support. Whether you just want to learn more about ITB, get connections to us on our social media, look at more videos on our YouTube channel, schedule sessions or hop in for classes, no matter what. Please look for those, participate as much as you want, and we'll be here for you. If you have any direct questions, if you're watching this on YouTube and you have a direct question, please just simply write embodyingitb@gmail.com and write a question about it would be a good idea for you to mention the episode that you're watching. And let me hear your question and I'll try and respond as best as I can. I think we've got to close to 15 different episodes right now. So I will need you to say this is the episode you're paying attention to. So please feel free to hop on there, ask some questions. And we'll be back here next week. Thanks again for watching. Thanks again for participating. If you want to donate to us, you can do that via our social media stuff. You can find us on PayPal. It should be in the comments that are going to come underneath this YouTube channel. So we use PayPal and Venmo and all that jazz. So use what you want there. Lastly, go in peace. Enjoy your day. Feed yourself. Get plenty of rest. I hope that you work for openness, honesty, and clarity and curiosity in your relationships. And I wish you the best of luck with that. And please check in, and good luck to all of you as you move forwards through the world and in your own practice. All right. Again, thanks again. Be well. Take care.